year 1990, the largest museum robbery in history occurred. Thieves stole paintings worth $500 million. The way they broke into the museum was genius. The guards simply opened the door for them. Thieves didn't need to enter through a window or dig a tunnel from under the ground or anything. So how did they carry out this robbery? This is what we will know in today's story. The Gardner Museum is one of the oldest art museums in America. It was opened in Boston in the year 1903, meaning more than a century ago. The museum is an old palace that has no modifications have been made to it since its establishment, because the wealthy lady who founded it, Isabella Stewart Gardner, wrote in her will that the museum should remain as it is. If the opposite happened, all art pieces in it must be transferred to Paris and sold at auction, and all proceeds go to Harvard University. Therefore, the museum has been maintaining its shape for more than a century without major changes, and of course, an old building like this would certainly not have been built with the high safety standards in which modern museums are built. With this, the museum's administration provided it with all possible security, such as surveillance cameras, alarm systems, motion sensors, and so on. The museum contained more than 2,500 pieces of art, including paintings, sculptures, and others. The value of this art collection is estimated at billions. Of course, this thing made it an attractive target for thieves. And on the 18th of March of the year 1990, the museum was actually subjected to a huge robbery. And although the thieves stole only 13 pieces of art, these artworks are valued at more than $500 million. The robbery happened on St. Patrick's Day. Most of Boston's residents gathered in the city center, so thieves took advantage of this event to carry out the robbery. That day, there were two guards in the museum. The first was named Richard Abath. This man used to come to work, sometimes drunk. The second guard, whose name was Randy Heston. Richard's job was to sit and watch the security cameras. As for the second guard, Randy, his task was to take tours between the museum's rooms and corridors. At 1:00 a.m. on that day, a fire alarm went off on the museum's third floor. Richard asked Randy to go check what is happening, but he found that there was no problem, and it was only a malfunction in the alarm system. About 30 minutes later, at 1:30 a.m., two police officers approached the museum, specifically from the back door, which was designated for the employees. These two policemen knocked on the door. They asked the guards to open. The first guard, Richard, was sitting in the security office. He heard the sound of knocking on the door, and when he saw the cameras, he knew that those who were knocking on the door were the police. So his colleague went to the door to talk to them, and the police told him that they came in response to a report from someone who said to them that there was an alarm in the museum. The guard told the police that it was just a malfunction in the fire alarm, and they have checked out the place, and everything is all right. But the police were insistent on him, so the guard relented and opened the door. The police entered the museum and began to take a tour of the place. The first thing they went to was the surveillance office. They looked at it and at the cameras, and they were keen to move the guard away from the table because the only alarm button that was directly connected to the police station was on the table. A policeman told the guard, "I feel like I've seen you before, and your face is familiar." The second policeman entered the conversation and said to him, "Your face is really familiar, and I think that you are wanted for arrest." And he asked him to prove his identity. So the guard responded and gave him his ID. A few seconds later, the policeman said, "You are wanted." The two policemen grabbed the guard and handcuffed him. At this moment, the second guard, Randy, came, and he was surprised. He asked them what was going on, but they handcuffed him as well. The second guard was surprised. He asked them, "What are you doing?" The policemen simply replied, "We are here to rob you." These thieves took the two guards and tied them in the cellar, and they taped their heads. When the thieves got rid of the guards, they turned the cameras away from them and disabled the printer that records the data of motion sensors and alarms. Then they entered the rooms of the museum and began to take different artworks. The strange thing is that they stole only 13 pieces of art. They had all night they could get a truck and steal all the art in the museum. Likewise, they did not steal the most valuable paintings that were in the museum. They didn't even unscrew the paintings from their frames. Instead, they brought a scalpel and cut it from the edges, which means that the paintings they stole were badly damaged. But with all this, the things they stole are still of very high value. As we said, in total, they stole 13 pieces of art. The value of these art pieces is about $500 million, which made it the largest art theft in history. The next morning, the museum's staff found out what happened, so they called the police. After a few minutes, the police and the FBI arrived and began their investigations. Of course, they found the two guards tied up in the basement, and here are some real pictures of them. It was clear that the thieves were cleverly planning the intrusion, disguised as policemen, and they knew all the details about the security system in the office. But the robbery itself was stupid for several reasons. The first, because they could steal much more pieces of art than they did. The second is that they did not steal the most valuable art pieces in the museum. The third reason is that they destroyed the paintings and cut them off when they took them from their frames. These men know how to steal because they are thieves, but they don't know how to handle art because they have no experience in the field. Here, the investigators hoped that the thieves left a trail behind them, but after examining the museum, they did not get any traces, neither fingerprints nor ADN. They only had the testimony of the guards, and based on their testimony, rough sketches of the robbers were drawn. According to the guard Randy, the second guard, both of them are white skin, and they had black hair and large mustaches, but most likely they were fake. As for the first guard, Richard, he said that he didn't remember the details of their faces even after he saw the sketches. This leads us to one of the big theories in the case, which is that this operation was an inside job, and that the guard, Richard, was part of the gang. Everyone was witnessing that he used to come drunk to work, but on that particular day he was in full consciousness, and this is something that was really proven in blood analysis. Why, on that particular day, was he unusually conscious? The second thing, the thieves knew all the security details about the museum, and they knew where the only alarm button that was connected to the police station was located. They knew about motion sensors, alarms, and all the surveillance cameras. These details are supposed to be known only to those who work in the museum. On top of this, Richard is the one who brought them in, even though the laws and instructions prevent the guards from letting anyone into the museum, even the police. This was written in the instructions, but Richard says he had no knowledge of this law. These were just the assumptions of the investigators. They could not prove anything about him, but many things cast doubt on him. Now the investigators were confused, so they began to review previous cases and revolve around criminals or gang leaders who had previously had a relationship with artistic thefts like this. The investigators had three possibilities. The first possibility is that the thieves had a head mastermind behind them, like a gang leader or a rich man who loves works of art, and he is the one who hired them to carry out the operation. The second possibility is that the thieves were working for themselves, but they had links to gangs and the mafia, so they would offer these works on the black market in their own ways. The third possibility is that the thieves may demand a ransom from the museum or the insurance company in exchange for returning the stolen items, because the amount paid by the insurance company will certainly be much greater than the ransom. But the surprise that the investigators discovered that the museum does not have insurance for their works. The museum was not able to bear the high costs of insurance, especially after the prices of works of art rose insanely in the 80s, and of course, insurance prices rose with them, as the museum management did not endure the costs of insurance for the works they had. All they were able to do is to offer a prize of $1 million to anyone who would come up with information that would lead to finding the stolen pieces of art. Of course, this was a huge prize, but it was nothing compared to the value of the stolen items. This amount was attractive to many people, and the museum administration began to receive several calls, but most of them were false. One of these calls was from a man who claimed that there were two people he knew who had relations to the underworld gangs, and there were similarities between them and the sketches published by the police. The investigators began to follow these two people and were able to reach them. They found one dead person in his car who was stabbed and tied with a rope, with a plastic bag on his head, meaning that his killers were gangsters. The second person was found dead in the hospital due to a heart attack, and the causes of this attack were unknown. The investigators concluded that this probably was organized crime, and the death of the two men at the same period cannot be a coincidence. The investigators compared these men's faces with the two persons in the sketches they had, but there was no strong resemblance. We are now in the year 1997, which means that 7 years have passed since the incident. The museum's administration raises the award to $5 million after contributions from major sponsors in the artistic field. After the reward was raised, important events occurred in the story. These events will not be caused by the police or the FBI, but will be caused by a journalist named Tom Mashberg. Tom was working for a well-known newspaper in the city of Boston and had an interest in this case. During his research on the case, he knew about an art thief named Miles Connor, one of the most known art thieves in Boston. The journalist Tom began to search more about Miles Connor's history and about the previous robberies he had carried out, and he discovered that this operation was similar to Connor's operations. But Connor was actually imprisoned at the time of the operation. He thought that maybe Connor had friends who carried out this operation with his assistance, so when he began to investigate Connor's friends, he found a man named William Youngsworth. He was an antique dealer who had very suspicious activities, such as thefts and cases of weapons and drug dealing. Tom the journalist decides to publish articles in the newspaper about William and his connection to Connor, as well as his possible connection to the Gardner Museum robbery. Tom has published about 3 or 4 articles, all focused on William. One day, William Youngsworth reaches out to Tom and asks him to stop the lies he is writing about him and that he is hurting his reputation. On the date of 18 August 1997, Tom received a call from an unknown person. This person told him, "I am a representative of someone you know. Tonight, after you finish work, I want to take you to a place and show you something." Tom immediately knew that this man was sent by Youngsworth, so Tom agreed to meet him after he finished work. Indeed, after work, Tom met this unknown man, and they rode in his car. An hour's drive from Boston, they arrived at a building in an isolated location. The unknown man entered the building and Tom followed him. The place was a large warehouse containing many things. The unknown man opened a plastic cylinder and took out a folded painting and opened it to show Tom. This painting was called A Storm in the Sea of Galilee, and it was one of the works of the famous Dutch artist Rembrandt, and it was one of the paintings that were stolen from the museum. This was a surprise to Tom. The unknown man was holding the light on the painting so that Tom could see its details and make sure of them, such as the ashes of the corners, and the most important thing is Rembrandt's signature on the corner of the painting. And after about 30 seconds, the man folded the painting and said to Tom, "That's enough." Then they left the warehouse, and he got into the car again and drove back to Boston. The unknown man asked Tom to not tell anyone what he saw for 3 days until they moved the paintings to another place, so Tom agreed. Tom could not tell the police in order to preserve his reputation as a journalist. A few days later, Youngsworth contacted the FBI and told them that he had information that could lead them to recover the stolen works. But he had some conditions. Youngsworth asked the FBI to drop all charges against him that were not originally related to the robbery. The first condition was, he told them that he wanted them to drop all his charges. The second request is that they release Connor from prison and drop his charges as well. The third condition is that they give them the $5 million prize announced by the museum. And to prove his words, he told the FBI to call the journalist Tom. In order to confirm that he is not lying, the FBI brought some technical experts from the museum, and they called Tom to confirm the claims he told them everything he saw. The experts asked him about specific details in the painting, like the shape of the cracks and the location of the signature, and about certain signs they know in the painting. Tom told them that he saw the painting in a dark warehouse with a spotlight, and it was just a quick look, but he was sure that he had seen the real painting. Despite all of this, the FBI didn't want to submit to the conditions of Youngsworth, and they refused it on the pretext that they couldn't confirm that Youngsworth had the original paintings. In order to convince the FBI, and to make them believe that the paintings they had are real, Connor entered the line and began confessing. He started telling them about the details of the robbery, and that 2 of his followers went to the Gardner Museum and found that the security system was weak. Connor told them that he was the one who planned the way they stormed the museum, and he told them to disguise themselves as police. He also told them the name of one of his followers, William Hutton, who usually kept the stolen works. By the way, William is the man who died of a heart attack. But after William Hutton's death, Youngsworth kept all the artworks with him. But even with all this evidence, the FBI rejected the deal and refused to agree to their terms. These negotiations reached a dead end. Connor was refusing to give any additional information, and Youngsworth was refusing to speak unless Connor was given immunity, and the FBI refused negotiations until they were presented with proof that the works were authentic. A few days later, in October of the year 1997, an envelope was sent to the office of the journalist Tom. This envelope contained photo film that needed development, and also some very small pieces of the painting. After developing the photos, they discovered that the photos were of Rembrandt's paintings that were stolen from the museum, and the photography expert in the newspaper confirmed that the photos are real, and the FBI confirmed that as well. As for the small pieces of paint that were in the envelope, they sent them to a specialist for verification. Indeed, the expert said that these pieces of paint definitely date back to the 17th century, meaning the time when the paintings were painted, and this is the same type of paint that was used by Rembrandt, meaning that the type of paint matches. This was supposed to be strong evidence supported by an expert opinion, but when the FBI took these pieces of paint and examined them themselves, the conclusion came that they did not correspond to the pieces of paint that were at the crime scene. They refused to admit these pieces as evidence to prove that the paintings are real. One of the negotiators asked Connor and Youngsworth to give them one of the stolen paintings as proof of their words. But they refused to present the painting because they knew that they would be arrested all along, as there was nothing to protect them, and they could add the charge of extortion against them. The deal was not completed, and after a while, the negotiations stopped completely. And in the end, Connor completed his sentence in prison. And the stolen paintings were not recovered, and the FBI were unable to arrest the thieves who actually carried out the robbery. The case is considered unsolved, and no one knows to this day the whereabouts of the paintings. Youngsworth and Connor may be among the few people in the world who know where are these artworks. Connor later wrote a book about his past and other thefts. However, what do you think of what happened? Did the FBI want to set a trap for Connor and Youngsworth and failed, or did they really have a real suspicion? Did Connor and Youngsworth really have the original paintings? I would like to see your opinions below in the comments. And here we come to the end of the story. Do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell button. And these are some videos about the greatest thefts in history that you can watch. Thank you for watching.